Welcome to the Tomorrow Zone Catalyst podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Rubin. This is a special episode. This is our 100th episode of this podcast. And with the recent launch of my book, Enter the Tomorrow Zone, we're going to explore some of the patterns that we've seen across all of the conversations over the past 2 years on this show. My book, Enter the Tomorrow Zone, describes 5 distinct shifts that help you to create the conditions for innovation that succeeds and thrives. And that framework emerged through decades of innovation leadership work. But it was interesting because over the last 2 years of doing this podcast, we've seen a lot of these same patterns emerge and show up through the conversations on our show. And so just as a quick reminder, if you haven't read my book yet, it's available on Amazon. You can go check it out. But the 5 shifts that I talk about that help you to create the conditions for innovation to thrive are align, imagine, co-create, empower, and evolve. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jenica.
Congratulations, Deb, on 100 episodes. That is amazing.
It is. I am so excited that we're at this point.
It's so fun to celebrate. And I really love this concept of looking back and connecting dots to recognize patterns. And right here, this is the premise. We did not set out to design a framework and then go find proof. The framework emerged through decades of innovation work, and we see the same patterns in the conversations on the show. Deb, when we started this podcast, what were you hoping it would become?
I had a really simple goal, and this was part of the goal when I started this business. I really desire to have space and freedom to explore what innovation looks like in the real world, to follow my curiosity. Absolutely love connecting with cool people around cool ideas and exploring the art of the possible. And so for decades, I've led innovation at the intersection of business and technology. And there was just a lesson that just kept showing up over and over and over again. Too often we think that it's about select the right software and it's going to solve all our problems. But the thing that I have learned over the years, and it's proven itself over and over and over again, is that technology doesn't transform. People do. And so the Tomorrow Zone system comes from those decades of work, watching how innovation actually happens in real organizations, what works and what doesn't. And so, we have a practice of reflection at Tomorrow Zone. And as we were reflecting on trends that we're seeing and things that we were learning, the team actually came up with this idea to do a podcast. And so we ended up calling the show the Tomorrow Zone Catalyst, because we want to create a space where we can spark fresh thinking about technology, innovation, and future possibilities. And what does it mean for us as humans? And I think that what this show has done over the past couple of years is something a little different. It really gives us an opportunity to just have a window into how these patterns are showing up across our own industry in equipment finance, where we spend a lot of time, but also across other industries, leaders of all different types, and technologies of different types. Everything isn't only about AI. And so it was really cool. Different guests, different contexts, but the same underlying dynamics kept showing up over and over. And so even from our first episode, we were talking about being catalysts for new thinking, catalysts for technology, innovation in the future. And, I always love how Steve Jobs, he said in a pretty famous talk that he did, it's easier to connect the dots if you're looking backward. And I agree. So we're just going to do that. We're going to do some pattern recognition and take a look back on 100 episodes and see what we can see. We saw a lot of different patterns emerge, from how we define and frame innovation to really how we create those conditions that really enable innovation to thrive in a team. And we also saw pitfalls that can hold back innovation.
Absolutely.
So let's dive in.
Yeah. What was the first pattern about innovation leadership that really emerged across these first 100 episodes?
One of the patterns that kept showing up, and I even saw this, when I was leading the Innovation Council for ELFA for 6 fun-filled years. I was meeting with leaders every month, and it's so interesting. The human side of innovation kept showing up over and over, no matter which technology was in the hype cycle at the time. And there was a distinct pattern that showed up a lot, and it's the F word, fear. Fear holds back innovation. In fact, I ran into a stat as I was writing my book. There was a McKinsey study that was done a while back, and they found that 85% of executives were saying that fear holds their organizations back from innovating. And it's not difficult to see this happening. We see it all the time, especially in a world of AI hype where people are concerned about whether they even will have a job in the future. And so 85% of executives interviewed in that study said that fear holds their organizations back. But the thing that was even more astounding to me was that 9 out of 10 of those executives were doing absolutely nothing about it. And I saw an amazing and distinct opportunity. I started asking, what if you were the leader who actually did something about that? While your competitors were stuck in status quo thinking, letting fear hold them back. And I just see tremendous opportunity there.
Yeah.
So there were a few episodes that really stood out over the past couple of years. And we're going to just kind of call out the episode numbers, because if you're listening and you're interested in these topics, you can pop back in the episode list on our show and you can check them out.
Absolutely.
Way back in the beginning, in the second episode, we talked with Jen Kronberger, who's a partner of Tomorrow Zone, and she's the inventor of the Brave Human Leadership method. And we talked with her about fear of failure and how leaders can unintentionally shut down experimentation and the activities that are necessary for true innovation. And then we continued the conversation with her, and we actually collaborated with the Human Leadership Institute and did a whole mini series on Brave Human Leadership. And so if you're a leader who wants innovation to thrive in your organization, there may be some nuggets of wisdom in there for you to check out. And that's episodes 56 through 58, 60, and 61. Throughout this conversation, Jen laid out what leaders can do to empower their teams to innovate.
Yeah.
We also, though, interviewed innovation leaders from the equipment finance space. And so that was a really interesting thing, because through those innovation leader conversations, multiple guests described situations where that fear of failure, which often leads to silence in teams, it leads to avoiding difficult conversations. Silence can cost your team more than bad ideas ever could. And so that's a tricky trap. And, we often think it's all about the technology, but often it's about the conversations that aren't happening. And so especially interesting to explore in terms of how to lead through that. The episode 31 with Scott Keenan, he's an innovation leader from Customers Bank, I think. And then also Jillian Munson, who leads innovation at QuickFi. They both had really interesting perspectives on what it takes to lead through that. And then we also did a fun episode with best-selling author Hillary Bilberry in episode 11. And we even called it the F word.
Yeah.
So we weren't talking about culture. We were actually talking about transformation, and the real issue underneath all of it, the pattern that we see across all those stories, is the avoidance of those important conversations that are sometimes difficult to have. And the challenge is, these innovation initiatives, transformational initiatives, they don't stall, get stuck. because people aren't smart. Often the people that are assembled on these teams are incredibly brilliant. Yeah. Often the challenge comes in and innovation dies because people don't feel safe to speak up. That kind of underlines the importance of the align and the empower shift that I talk about in the book, Enter the Tomorrow Zone. And those two shifts became apparent throughout all those conversations. And it was pretty cool to see, it's not theory. These are the survival conditions that are necessary for innovation to thrive in your team.
Another thing that we talk a lot about here at Tomorrow Zone is stepping away from the day to day. We've talked about it on this podcast. You and I have had conversations about it. You write about it in your book, Enter the Tomorrow Zone. Why is that such an important theme to you?
Actually, a story comes to mind. So I was working with a bank enterprise, and I was consulting with their senior and C-level leaders. And one of the things that I found that was the most effective to try to get people out of their day-to-day and into possibility thinking, I was often asked, can you help my team explore the art of the possible? We had to actually set aside time to do that. When your team is involved in day-to-day constant firefighting, you can't demand, hey, get out of the box. Our brains don't work that way. Like, it's a biological limitation. It's not because they're bad, and it's not because they're not creative. Well, I often run into teams where there's no end to ideas, but often we're missing set aside special time and space to actually think that way, and we're missing the structure and sometimes just even a little bit of education on how to get into that thinking process. And so, that was a big experience that really informed why I talk about stepping away from day to day. Because until you do that, you can't get into the headspace to think differently about future possibilities. And this is also core to Tomorrow Zone thinking. The core idea is clarity first, then technology. Too many teams are starting with technology and then backing into clarity, but it's too late. And so you can't be in that expansive future shaping possibility mode when you're fighting the fires of day to day. There are so many examples of how that showed up, whether you're shaping the future for something totally new, or maybe you're just modernizing, upgrading, continually improving. But whenever we interviewed people who were doing meaningful innovation, we saw the same thing, that pause before moving forward, that pause to get clarity, that pause to get aligned on what are we creating and why. And so in episode 70, we actually talked about how we do this with clients at Tomorrow Zone. So we unpacked the Catalyst Sprint, and that's our signature approach for getting teams aligned on the big picture for the current state, but also future possibility. And the common thread that we see with teams who succeed together, what makes the most difference in their digital transformation results, it isn't the tools that they select. Sorry, software vendors, it's not that. I mean, you're doing good work out there, but really what makes a difference is when the team pauses to get completely aligned together before committing to action. That pause to ensure that they have absolute shared understanding of not only what they're doing together, but why and what success means.
I was going to ask about buy-in. We talk about that a lot.
Yeah. So buy-in is a tricky thing because I think a lot of times people think that they have buy-in, but often it's just theater or polite agreement that's politically safe in meetings. So you'll see a lot of vigorous head nodding during the meeting as you're showing your slides where you're conveying your vision, and then all sorts of different conversations happen in the hallways outside of the meeting. Do you really have buy-in? And what does buy-in actually really mean? And so what we have found is that What we really need is co-ownership. And that comes through co-creation. Co-creation creates the turning point. So one of the things I have learned along the way is that buy-in is not some bolt-on activity that you stick on the end of sharing your vision slides. That's theater. What matters more than buy-in is that ownership, and that's created through collaboration, co-creation. It's actually an accelerator for innovation and transformation and that's when and what we mean by that is when you're engaging other people in co-creating the plan, the concept, the idea, the roadmap. It's so hard to resist a plan that you were part of creating. And so we see this on all sorts of different levels. One of the very first episodes we did, it was such a fun conversation, and I still remember this. We had to make it a 2-part.
Right, that's right.
Because it was so fun. So I was talking with Curtis McConnell, and he's the founder of Authentify Art. And when I think about the Leonardo da Vinci of our time in the digital space, it's him. And we talked about cross-functional and industry-level innovation, the breakthroughs that happen at the intersections of different technologies and different thought processes and models. And so he's using blockchain technology to really revolutionize the high-value art world. And it's a really fascinating conversation, but it was co-creation that was the unlock for him in that initiative. And then in episode 10, we interviewed Amy Whitney. She's the director of the University of North Dakota's Center for Innovation. And they're actively co-creating with the business community in a couple of different interesting areas. Aerospace innovation was one of them, but the other that was really interesting is the way that they're collaborating with senior care facilities to completely reimagine the senior care experience. And I know for myself, for you, a lot of the folks that I know are dealing with, caring for their parents.
Yeah.
So this is a really hot topic, and it was really neat to see that it wasn't just, people in a room somewhere kind of assuming what matters in those situations, but they're actually collaborating with the folks that are most impacted and are stakeholders in that, and really rethinking and reimagining the possibilities there. And the big thing that came out in that conversation is that translation matters. It's a leadership superpower. Innovation fails when we have information silos. And we see this, in the senior care transformation, but we also see it within companies, in finance companies. One of the challenges is we have information in silos and people are not collaborating seamlessly across functions, and we lose sight of the big picture. We don't understand each other. There were a couple other episodes that I think really underline the importance of co-creation. So Alana Lipset in episode 21 and Eric Williamson in episode 22. For both of these, we were discussing industry level collaboration and in very unique circumstances, but they both shared how solutions were always strengthened when multiple voices were brought together to shape them, whether it was in technology or, innovating the experience in a refugee camp. Very diverse contexts, same theme. So, the power of co-create and co-ownership is, it can't be ignored. And too often it is. So, if you just remember, it's hard to resist the plan you help create. How can you bring people into co-creating the future that you want to see? Ownership is just so much stronger than the polite agreement of buy-in theater that we see all too often.
Yeah, that's so powerful to keep that in mind. I know you always talk about having a sticky, who else should be a part of this conversation? And just always stopping. And again, it goes back to that pause, taking a pause and asking yourself, is there anybody else that could be a part of this that would bring new insight to move us forward? So it's really powerful. That's really powerful. Yeah, we have talked a lot about AI on our podcast. It's the hot topic, but we kind of approach it a little bit differently. What have those episodes taught you?
Well, they have reinforced a lot of the same patterns that I've been seeing for decades. People are still getting caught up in that technology first trap. And so, I mean, the big takeaway there is clarity first, then tech. Whether it's ERP or it's AI, you've got to step back and examine what you want to create. What problem are you solving? And more importantly, why? And who needs to be involved? We talked about it through a lot of episodes. Episode 19 with Daniel Doloff, our partners from Leventis. You and I geeked out about this in episode 35. And we also talked about it in episode 48. And for anybody who's worried about AI causing you to lose the human touch in your relationship building, Amy Yamada, enormous practical experience in leveraging AI for relationship building. A lot of professionals worry that AI is going to take away the human touch, but what we explored is what if AI can actually enhance your communication and human connections. So if you're in sales or any relationship building mode, check that one out. And then recently, Jake Cutler and I talked about in episode 92 AI maturity, and we geeked out on a lot of things, but it all came back to purpose, knowing your purpose as you're moving forward. So, I mean, I think we talk about AI in almost every single episode.
I think it shows up. It's hard to have a conversation where it doesn't show up anymore. Absolutely. So, episode 100. If you had to summarize the first 99 in one belief, what would it be?
I guess the big thing is remembering that innovation is not an event. Innovation is a habit. It's a set of behaviors and practices that we're doing all the time. It's a way of being. This came out in several episodes. In episode 17, I interviewed John Cooper, and he is a senior leader at CNH Industrial Capital, a lot of business and technology responsibility. But it was interesting. We kind of dismantled the myth of the big breakthrough moment. Really, what came out in that is you shape the future through innovative collaborations. And his key leadership move is by strengthening relationships and building trust over time, and that paved the way for him to be able to innovate in a very complex environment. When we talk about sustaining change, episode 36, rhythm. In episode 62, I talked with Ross Smith of Initium Softworks, ISW, and there it was interesting because we talked about embedding innovation practices so that they survive leadership turnover. So the leaders who survive and actually get results, they don't treat innovation like an event. They treat it like a continual practice. And that's the evolve shift that we talk about in the book. So I think that, most of the episodes touched on at least one, but many touched on multiple shifts of the Tomorrow Zone system. And I think that just kind of reinforces the notion that these are interconnected mindset shifts that work together like gears. Where you feel the pain in innovation is whenever one of them isn't fully activated. And you can find more about that in the book, Enter the Tomorrow Zone.
So, Deb, what are you carrying into the next 100 episodes?
It's I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's clarity first, then technology. It's creating space for imagination. It's co-creation to create shared ownership over polite compliance. I think that, human-centered leadership is so vital in this age of chaotic acceleration. And the system itself, the Tomorrow Zone system, it emerged from decades of working with people to leverage technology to make their world a better place. And I think that across the last 99 conversations, we confirmed a lot of those patterns that we were seeing. And the book now gives it crystallized language, and we can now explain it as a system.
Hmm.
So for the next 100 episodes, we're really going to continue to lean in and explore that. So what we're going to be doing next is exploring how leaders design those environments where innovation dreams survive impact with reality. We're going to be exploring how leaders are intentionally shaping the future and living the shifts of the Tomorrow Zone system day to day. And I'm really excited about that series. We're going to take an intergenerational approach. So I am going to be leading, interviewing young emerging talent founders. You may be surprised by some of the folks that we're going to be talking with. We're going to be interviewing leaders who are in the midst of leading the charge right now. And I'm also going to be reaching out to leaders who are retired but have led major future shaping initiatives that we are enjoying the benefits of today. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. And I really believe, even as we're looking to the future, we need to honor and capture the wisdom of the past. So I'm really excited for what's to come. And if you're a listener, I hope that you continue to join us as we explore our curiosity in public.
Absolutely. Well, Deb, congratulations again. I'm so excited about what we have done, and I am excited about what is coming forward. It's going to be amazing. And, when we started this podcast, we really thought that we were just exploring innovation. But 100 conversations later, one truth is clear: innovation doesn't fail because people aren't smart. It fails when we don't create the conditions for it to survive. When fear replaces curiosity, when speed replaces clarity, when silence replaces engagement, or when quiet compliance replaces ownership and alignment. But innovation does thrive when leaders protect the space to imagine and invite others to co create and stay steady through the messy middle. The Tomorrow Zone is not a destination, it is a way of leading, and the future doesn't just happen. We shape it intentionally by the actions we take and the decisions we make today. Stay curious and choose to make awesome happen.